Some stories feel like urban legends until they happen to you. This is what locals in Salem, Massachusetts call the Shadow Man of Gallows Hill. I grew up in Salem. Everyone knows the town's dark history, the witch trials, Gallows Hill, the old cemeteries tourists can't resist. But there's a story locals don't tell outsiders. A story about a man-shaped shadow that follows people home at night and knocks on their bedroom doors when they're alone. I never believed it until last summer. It started one night in July. My friends and I had been out late near Gallows Hill Park, and I cut through the wooded trail to get back to my apartment. That trail is old, winding through stone walls and trees that look centuries dead. About halfway through, I heard footsteps behind me, not the sound of another hiker. Heels dragging, slow, deliberate. I turned, no one there, just empty woods. I kept walking, faster this time, when I noticed something strange. The shadows didn't line up. The moon was bright overhead, and every tree cast a shadow to the right. But mine wasn't alone. There was another, taller shadow standing just behind me. I froze. My chest tightened. I didn't dare look back, just ran until I reached the road. That night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to a knock on my bedroom door. 3 dull thuds, evenly spaced, like someone testing the wood. I live alone. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. The knocking stopped. The next morning, my neighbor, an old woman who's lived in Salem her whole life, asked me if I'd been out walking near Gallows Hill. When I nodded, she said, "He's been here longer than the town. Once he follows you home, don't answer, not even once." I tried to laugh it off, but the next night, it happened again. Same knock, same time. I checked the hallway, empty. On the third night, I stayed up waiting. Around 3:07 a.m., I heard footsteps outside my apartment door dragging, scraping footsteps that stopped right outside. Then the knock came. Every instinct told me not to look, but the knocking wouldn't stop. I pressed my eye to the peephole. There was nothing, just darkness. But when I looked down, I swear I saw it. A shadow standing on my welcome mat. No body, just a shadow. I backed away, grabbed my phone, and called the police. By the time they arrived, nothing was there. They said no one was in the hall, no footprints, nothing. But the next morning, I saw it on my door. Handprints. Black, charred-looking handprints pressed deep into the wood. I haven't slept properly since. The people in Salem say once he knocks 3 nights in a row, he's chosen you, and the only way to survive is never to answer the door. So if you ever visit Salem, Massachusetts, don't walk the Gallows Hill Trail at night. And if you hear a knock on your bedroom door around 3 a.m., don't open it, because it won't be a person on the other side. It'll be him. I used to think stalking was something that only happened to celebrities, until it happened to me. This was last winter, in Boston. I worked late nights at a bar downtown and usually walked home. 15 minutes, familiar streets, nothing unusual. The first night, I noticed him right after my shift. Boots on the icy sidewalk, just behind me. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I slowed down. So did he. I crossed the street. He crossed too. When I turned around, I saw him clearly. A tall man in a black hood and a ski mask. At 1:30 in the morning, I ran home that night and locked the door. When I peeked through my blinds, the street was empty. The next night, he was there again. Always the same distance behind, always silent. But that night, when I got to my apartment door, I noticed something chilling. A single dirty fingerprint, smudged right on my doorknob. The third night, I changed my route. Side streets, alleys, doubling back. For a while, I thought I lost him. But when I reached my building He was already there, standing across the street, under a broken streetlight, not moving. That was the first time I called the police. They searched, found nothing, but then he started leaving things. The first was a folded piece of paper on my doormat. Inside was a Polaroid photo of me walking home the night before, taken from only a few feet away. The second was worse. One morning, I woke up and found my bedroom window cracked open. On the windowsill was another Polaroid. This one was me sleeping in my bed. That was the moment I realized he'd been inside. I barely slept after that. The final straw happened a week later. Around 2 a.m., I heard faint scraping outside my apartment door, like a key slowly twisting in the lock. I froze, holding my breath, staring at the door. The knob rattled. Then, footsteps slow, deliberate, moving away. I waited until morning before checking. On the floor outside my door was a new Polaroid. It was me, standing at the peephole, taken from the hallway. I moved apartments a week later. Different neighborhood, different lock, different everything. But sometimes at night, I still hear those slow, dragging footsteps behind me. And I wonder if he ever really stopped, or if he's just waiting for me to let my guard down again. I used to rent a small house outside of Portland, Maine. It wasn't anything special, just a weathered 2-story home on a quiet street called Willow Road. The kind of place where nothing ever seemed to happen. When I signed the lease, my landlord was an older guy, maybe in his late 60s. After we went through the paperwork, he looked at me strangely and said, "Just don't be outside after midnight. And if you hear someone call your name, don't answer." I laughed it off. He didn't. His face stayed dead serious. I remember thinking it was just some weird local superstition. For the first few months, nothing unusual happened. I worked evenings at a diner, came home, and lived a pretty quiet life. Sometimes friends would visit and would stay up late talking. Willow Road was calm, almost too calm. But that changed last October. My friend Sarah came over one Friday night. We'd known each other since college, and she lived just a few blocks away. We ordered pizza, watched old horror movies, and joked about how creaky my house was. By the time we finished, it was nearly 11:30, and she decided to walk home. I offered to drive her, but she laughed and said, "It's literally a 10-minute walk. I'll be fine." I watched from my porch as she headed down the sidewalk, disappearing into the faint fog rolling in from the river. The street lamps flickered, but that wasn't unusual. At 12:15, my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. It said one word: help. At first, I thought it was a joke. Sarah liked to mess with me, especially after horror movies. But something about the message made my stomach drop. There was no emoji, no context, just that single word. I called her immediately. No answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. That's when I grabbed my jacket and ran outside. Willow Road was eerily quiet. Fog hung low, swallowing the street lamps so the road looked endless. My footsteps echoed louder than they should have, and every house I passed looked dark and abandoned. I kept calling her phone as I walked. The sound of my own ringtone echoed faintly down the street. I followed it. Halfway down Willow Road, I saw a shape on the ground. Sarah. She was lying on her side, one arm stretched out, her phone still clutched in her hand. Her eyes were half open, and for a second, I thought she was still alive. But when I knelt beside her, I knew she wasn't breathing. The weirdest part, she didn't look hurt, not even a bruise. Her skin was pale, but there was no blood, no wound, nothing. She looked like she had just collapsed mid-step. I called 911, and the police arrived within minutes. They pushed me back, checked for a pulse, and then covered her body with a sheet. One of the officers, asked me what happened, and I told them about the text. He frowned and took her phone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just kept hearing my landlord's words, "Don't be outside after midnight. And if you hear someone call your name, don't answer." 2 days later, a detective came by to ask more questions. I told him again about the text that said help. He gave me this look I'll never forget, like he wasn't sure if I was lying or if he wished I was. Then he told me something that made my blood run cold. The text didn't come from her number. It came to her phone. The last message on it wasn't help. It was my name, repeated over and over. He showed me the screen. My name written in dozens of messages, all sent just minutes before Sarah died. When I asked if they knew who sent them, the detective shook his head and said the messages came from an untraceable source. No number, no ID. Almost like they appeared on their own. Her death was ruled undetermined. Not a heart attack, not an overdose, nothing. They couldn't find a single cause. A week later, I moved out. I couldn't stay in that house anymore. Not with the memory of Sarah lying in the fog just a few doors down. But here's the thing. I still drive past Willow Road sometimes. The house is still there, empty, the curtains drawn. Locals don't like to talk about it, but I've overheard things. Some say people hear voices on that street after midnight calling their names from somewhere in the fog. Others say if you answer, you'll be found dead, just like Sarah. No wounds, no struggle, just gone. I don't know what really happened that night. I don't know what took her, but I do know one thing. When your phone buzzes at 12:15 a.m. and you see a message that just says help, don't answer, because it might not be a person texting you. And if you do answer, you might not live long enough to regret it.